I'd like to begin by extending a warm welcome to the Global Landscapes Forum audience, because we're going to discuss climate change from a rights perspective, human rights perspective. And that pleases me very much because that was the perspective that I came to climate change. I'd be the first to admit I came quite late. I served for 5 years as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights from 1997 to 2002, and I never spoke about climate change because another part of the UN was dealing with it. It was when I was working in African countries on economic and social rights, the most important rights if you don't have them, rights to food and water and health and education and shelter, that I realized that people were saying things were so much worse when it came to food security, when it came to trying to have a livelihood, because of changes in the weather, changes in the climate, unpredictable changes. And they were very severe, long periods of drought, flash flooding, destroying the village. And I learned stories that I've written in my book on climate justice of building resilience in these difficult circumstances, because there is an injustice in climate change. It affects disproportionately the poorest countries, the poorest communities, indigenous peoples, old people, people with disability, young people, especially when there's either a sudden disaster, and that's happened, for example, at the moment in Mozambique, where there's terrible flooding, and also in Zimbabwe and Malawi, maybe more than 1,000 people killed. Very poor people, very vulnerable, and not responsible. And therefore, we have to have an approach to this issue, which is a moral and justice approach, as well as an economic approach on reducing emissions, etc. I was very supportive of school children getting engaged in this issue. I admired greatly the leadership of Greta Thunberg herself. I watched her outside the Swedish Parliament before anybody had heard of her as a 15-year-old at that time. And then she was at the COP in Katowice, and she was in Davos speaking truth to power. And what children are saying around the world is we are suffering from intergenerational injustice, because our future is not being protected, it's not being secured by you adults who should be doing more. It's a very powerful message, and it's a justice message. I've noted that the children have no problem using the words climate justice because they profoundly understand the concept. And we have an opportunity, we have a window of about 12 years to get back on track of reducing global greenhouse gas emissions by 45%. By 2030, so that we're on track then for zero emissions by 2050. And I have a message usually now for every audience that I talk to, so I'll also have this message for all of you, and I'll finish with it. We need to do three things. We need to take seriously, personally, the issue of climate change in our lives. And we've got to do something we weren't doing before. I've become a pescatarian. I no longer eat meat. Secondly, we have to get angry with those who have much more responsibility because they have the power to do more. I'm talking about governments at all levels, not just national government, but in cities, in local government, and of course internationally. And then we have to talk about the power of business, the power of agriculture, the power of transport. These are sectors that have to take seriously their responsibilities. And the third thing, and I think we need to do this more and more, is we must imagine this world we need to be hurrying towards, because it will be a much better world. First of all, it will be a much healthier world, because we won't have the fumes and the air quality, the air pollution of fossil fuels. And secondly, we will have a much fairer world, because to get to that world, we will have had to support developing countries in getting access to clean technology. We'll have to make sure that the billion people who never switch a switch for electricity get clean off-grid electricity, and that will take them out of poverty. It will be a world of much better relationships, I believe, because we will need solidarity and empathy to get to that world. So I'm delighted that the focus is on rights, and that will be your discussion, and I wish you all the best in that discussion.